Hey, what's going on? I'm Corey, and I want to show you how I make my drums when I'm making hip hop or R&B. So, I have a track pulled up here. This is something that I was working on, I think like yesterday. So I'll just briefly play what I have. Great, so I'm gonna solo the kick and the drum group. Actually, I'm gonna rename this. Something that I just wanna go over really quick. I usually group my drums, except for my kick. I feel like the kick in a hip hop track, it's meant to stand out so much so that I like to keep it separate. I like to process that separately. But the rest of my drums, I like to group. So here I have my kick. As you can see, I have my drum rack in Ableton Live pulled up. I have a bunch of kicks that I put just on the one key trigger. So how I did that, I actually went over this in another video that I can link you to. But I pulled up a drum rack, and then I pulled up another drum rack, and I put it directly on that trigger, and that opens up a whole new drum rack within that drum rack. So then what I did is I put a bunch of kick samples within that second drum rack. What I'm able to do is scroll through and pick which kick that I want that trigger to play. This just helps me pick a sample much more quickly than trying things out, dragging them over and seeing what they sound like, and then switching from a different library. I can just drag all my favorite kicks or whatever kicks I think are gonna work in this track into one drum rack, play the song, and then scroll through and see which one that I like. So now I'll solo my drum group. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to relabel these. So I have my one hi-hat. So that's pretty much all it's doing. But then I have two other hi-hats on top of it. Cool. I find that having multiple hi-hats just gives you, a really cool range of sounds. It's just like ear candy. So next up is my clap. I just like tighter claps, just like little, kind of like a snare. It's acting like a snare. Over here, when it gets to the end of 4 or 8 bars, whatever you're counting as a bar, I have a little fill with my clap. Cool. So all together. And I think that all fits in really nicely. So now I'm just going to show you sort of the little mixing techniques that I do to sort of keep the drums separate from each other, but also keep them all sitting in the mix the way we want them to and sort of bringing them out. Keep in mind, I do have a master chain. I'll just show you that. Full disclosure, I'm going into a saturator. I like to do that with hip hop beats mainly because it just gives them that that drive, it sort of distorts it almost. And it's soft clipping. Essentially, that's what I'm doing. I'm going into a soft clipper. I'll have another video explaining that at some point. Let me know if you want that. Then I have Saturn. I'm just sort of saturating the highs. Then I have an EQ, mid-side EQ. Then I just have some more saturation, saturating the entire frequency spectrum. Then I found that the beat was just a little bit lacking in the high end still. So I just pulled up an EQ and I just boosted from like 5K upwards. So on my kick, what I'm doing is I have a little secret weapon. Not so secret because it's obviously available to anyone, but it's called the VOG, the voice of God. So what I have here is my amplitude and my frequency. What I like to do is I like to turn the amplitude all the way up, and then I fish around in the frequency to hear what it's doing. What this plugin does is I believe it adds harmonics wherever you're targeting it. It's made for low end, but yeah, I love this thing. Here's without it on the kick. And then with it. Without. With. So it just makes a really nice difference. So then I just have an EQ just sort of rolling off some of the lows. I felt like around 50 hertz it was poking out just a little bit too much, so I just dialed it back with the EQ a little bit. To be honest, I could have probably just brought down the amplitude in the VOG, but I was making the high pass filter in the EQ and I just felt a certain way, so I just did it right there. But it just goes to show that there are many different ways that you can approach mixing and achieve great results. So now on my clap, honestly on my clap I just have an EQ. I love the way that it sounded. What I am gonna do is I'm just gonna take an EQ now that we're discussing this, and I'm gonna sweep through and see. I feel like there's a little bit of harsh frequency in there somewhere, maybe a couple, but I like to get rid of any harsh frequencies because then when you boost your track and you want to hear it loud, it's not as fatiguing to people's ears, so they can listen to it longer. What I'm going to do is just create a boost in my EQ and then sweep through, and I'm going to listen for what sounds harsh to me, and then I'm going to pull that down. Yeah, I think that's where it is. So that's one way that I like to make my drums in these kind of productions. If you have your own method, you're more than welcome to share it in the comments below.